Hey guys, Daniel here. This is another video, and in this video, I'm joined by the legendary Peter Milligan. For those who don't know, Peter is an amazing writer. He's worked on some of the biggest comics of all time. Just to name a few. He's known for his work on Batman. He's done 2000 AD as well. He's worked on Bad Company, Hooligan's Haircut, amongst other things. Justice League Dark. He's the creator of Justice League Dark. He's worked on Hellblazer, Enigma, Shade the Changing Man, and like so much more comics. Elektra, Rogan, Gosh, Animal Man, Terminal Hero, New Romancer, and he has so much of his new comics. And he's working on X-Statix. He's the creator of Doop, who's just the greatest character to ever exist. And he has some new comics coming out soon. American Ronin, Happy Hour, and Out of Body. They're some of his more newer comics. But Peter, for some reason, has agreed to come on for an interview. So I'm really looking forward to annoying him for the next hour or so. Peter, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here, man.
Thank you so much. I'm sure it's a very sunny day in England and it's cold and wet. And
No, I'm sure it's very similar to Dublin.
It's brilliant. That's every guest.
Earlier today was okay. It was sunny, but cold. Yeah.
Every guest I interview, it's always, oh yeah, it's very sunny here in America. The birds are singing, and I'm like, oh yeah, well it's dark here. There's cars going by. So it's a nice change of pace to know that you're in the same misery that I am.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not too bad.
But my first question for you is, how did you get into comic books?
Well, I was not a huge comic book fan. Like a lot of guys are really, really big fans when they were young. I think the thing that really got me into comics was meeting Brett Ewins and Brendan McCarthy. They were really into comics and they were drawing comics. I was really into writing. And I was doing lots of experimental writing. And I then started to see some of the comics that Brett and Brendan were into. And I sort of thought, well, this is a really interesting way of telling stories. And then really that was my beginning. And then after meeting them, I then get more of an interest in comics,
Yeah. So, like, for growing up, was that your dream, just to be a writer or a comic writer, or just to work?
But, at first, I thought I'd be doing art, because art was my real love. And I still do love art. I mean, going to art galleries is one of my favorite things to do. So art is really important to me. I went to art school, but art school I got really interested in stories and writing as well. Always loved reading and always loved art.
Wow. And then how did 2000 AD come about? How did you get a job working for them?
Well, again, I think Brett and Brendan were working for them. I then sent some script ideas. They liked them. I then wrote some, I think, future shocks. Future shocks were the things which we kind of like, before they gave you a series, they kind of give you a 5 or 6 page future shock. And once you've handled them a few times and they can see that you know your way around a comic book page, they then graduate you onto a series, if you're lucky. Or unlucky, depending on which way you look at it.
I'm sure that's it. So, what was your first ever comic book? Was it for 2000 AD?
No, it was actually I did some things with Brendan. There was this small independent company, I think, called Pacific Comics, and I did something called Strange Days and Freak Wave. Some really crazy stuff. Strange Days, if you've never checked it out, was a really, really strange, bizarre collection of stories by me and Brendan and me and Brett Ewins. And that was where Johnny Nemo first appeared. And there was a story called Paradox, which is a superhero in New York, and Freakwave, which is the drowned world. And our guy is kind of the drifter who goes around this drowned world. And so that was my first, I think, real comics. And then from there, I really started to do 2000 AD, and it really took off from there, because then America came calling.
Yeah, and one comic of yours for 2000 AD that I love is Bad Company. I actually didn't know that you wrote that until recently. But how did Bad Company come about? Did you pitch that to them, or did they?
Okay, no, that was a really unusual way of coming about. I mean, very unusual for me, because normally I've got lots of ideas and I want to tell stories about ideas. I've done some future shocks for 2000 AD, and the editor and the sub-editor were really liking those. They really want to be a writer series.
Yeah.
John Wagner and Alan Grant had got this some ideas of this story called Bad Company. It was this future war story, but for some reason they then didn't progress with it. And so the guys at 2000 AD So gave me what they had and said, is there anything you could do with that? So I kind of like took the bare bones of what John and Alan had created, but then went my own way with it. I made it much more weird, made it much more, I think, about something which I was interested in. I wanted to make it a kind of an anti-war story, i.e. this young guy who's just been drafted into war and he's writing a diary. It's about all his experiences. Also wanted to bring in some strange character stuff. And so really put my stamp on it, really, to make it feel like a Peter Milligan comic. And it really did become a Peter Milligan comic. And even though John and Alan were the first ones to come up with the words "bad company," I think I really made it my own.
Yeah, and so did you just feel freedom, like you could do whatever you wanted on the comic book? Did you feel that while writing?
I've always tried to work on the assumption that doing it as you want to do it is best.
Yeah.
And if that's not what the editor wants, fine, you can then discuss it. The worst thing to do is try to second guess what someone else wants. And because you're not really putting your heart and soul into it, Daniel. And I always think it's really important that you write the story that you want to write. And I think that's advice that I always give to people who are trying to start out in comics, is to, what do you really want to write? What stuff really interests you? If you're going to do a future war story, don't look at what Alan has done before. Don't look at what other people have done before. What do you want to say about this thing? And so, yeah, I changed as much as I wanted to make it my story.
And it's amazing. Did you ever expect that, like, somewhat over 20 years later, people would still love the comic? And like, I wasn't even born when it comes out, and I love it. So did you ever expect that it would still go on to be great?
I was a child writer, you understand. That was a joke. Well, no, well, yeah. I mean, it's strange because you kind of like, particularly when you do signings, and you're doing a signing, and some people come along with comics that you wrote a long time ago, and it's kind of fantastic, really, to see these stories that you had, I don't know, years ago, still got some kind of life, and they still mean something to people, and it's pretty good.
I can imagine so. So that company,
it's a wonderful world of comics,
Exactly.
Again.
And was Bad Company your favorite story you wrote for 2000 AD, or do you have one that you
favorite?
Like?
You know what? I really enjoyed the time when I was writing Bad Company, because I was working with Brett Ewins, who sadly passed away quite recently. And the editor, the inker was Jim McCarthy, Brendan's brother. And the three of us kind of, we had a really good time. And it was a really good time because my comics career was starting up, and I was starting to break through. And we had a really good, close-knit kind of relationship. And it was kind of, we felt like we're in a kind of a band, really, because we were doing this stuff, and we'd go out for photo shoots. And so there's really good kind of like, so when I think of Bad Company, I think about that time. And it was just a really cool time, to be doing it. And but in terms of the comic, the story that I've most enjoyed writing, that I kind of feel most warm towards, I think I'd have to say, is either Sooner or Later, which is a really strange, small little story, which is all about these two guys that are out of work and they're knocking around Camden in London. And I used to go down Camden quite a lot in North London, just kind of close to where I live. So that was quite close to my heart. And then Hooligan's Haircut, because I really loved working with Jamie. And the name Hooligan obviously comes from, we wanted to draw this character that was a mix of both of us. So it was part Hooligan. So we probably did Milligan, but that didn't seem to work. That sounded like, I don't know, a tablet or something. But Hooligan was a mixture of our two names, and that was really great because Jamie was just kind of coming through really as well himself. So.
And so, like, that's kind of, you used both your names on that. And like, did you have that same haircut back in the 80s? The big long.
Say again?
Did you have the same?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was a haircut that changed reality. And whole, we're interested in some of the cartoons. You know, like Mickey Mouse's ears. Like whichever way you look at Mickey Mouse, the ears are exactly the same. So we all wanted that kind of like this strange hole that was exactly the same from whichever angle you looked at this guy.
And then, of
So
course,
yeah.
the Easter Island stones, of course, they turn out to be.
Yeah, I mean, again, just putting in stuff that really intrigues you and interests you. That was so good about that kind of story. And basically, they're interested you could chuck in there and use and make fun with it.
Yeah,
So it was a lot of fun.
I can only imagine. And if you were given the opportunity, would you like rewrite? Would you go back and write some more 2000 AD, maybe some more Bad Company or?
Well, I'd have to. There'd have to be a really good reason for me to write another Bad Company.
Yeah.
But I did go back a couple of years ago, and I wrote this story called First Casualties, which was a kind of like a. I don't know if you saw that, but that was kind of, if you like, if the first Bad Company stories, that it was its inspiration, I suppose, were all those kind of Vietnam movies we saw when we were younger, like Apocalypse Now, you know, these fantastic films. Yeah, I guess its influence was all of that, was all those Vietnam. It was really a Vietnam kind of feel to it, I think. The story I did when they said, "Do you want to write another Bad Company story?" Two things had to happen. Like Brett wasn't able to draw it anymore, so that really believed in it, and Rufus Daigler, who was this artist who really believed in the story, he loved that thing. And I said, I'll only write it if I have a story I really want to tell. I think the last thing you want to do is write a story just because they've asked you, or just for the money. That's not a good enough reason. You have to really feel it. And so the story I wrote, First Casualties, comes from the quote, which is, "Truth is the first casualty of war." And it's the kind of a quote which is, you know, with the lies and the propaganda that are around war. Now, that was based on a lot on the, you know, like the weapons of mass destruction, if you know this kind of stuff. But there were some wars that went on in the Middle East where I felt we were lied to a bit to get us into that war. So I want the story to be a bit about them, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And you're about to see some of my amazing segue skills into another topic. You know, so prepare yourself. So, of course, another iconic British character is John Constantine, and you got to write for Hellblazer. So, how did that come about?
As quite often happens, I think they wanted me to write. I wrote this 4-part story of Hellblazer. They said, "Do you want to write a 4-part?" It was always the case because I worked. Constantine and Hellblazer came from that Vertigo kind of group, and people often used to say, "How come you haven't written a Hellblazer?" And I was always doing something else at the time, and it was never kind of worked out. But the editor said, "Could you do a 4-part story?" And I wrote a 4-part story, and they really liked it. And then they said, "Do you want to write the series?" And it's typical in comics. It's kind of like, "Do you want to write the series? And by the way, the script's due next week." You know,
Deadlines, yes.
that's quite normal, you know. But yeah, so that's great. I had a lot of great fun on Constantine. Again, the trick is there's so many great writers had worked on Constantine, and he'd be going for such a long time. You have to. The first thing you do is ask yourself, what more can I say about this character that hasn't been said before? Because if there's nothing new to say, it's kind of why bother? But I felt as though there was aspects to his character that I could focus on and make him my character.
Yeah.
So you have to, you know, whether you're writing Batman or John Constantine, or when you write him, he has to be your character.
Yeah.
You can't feel as though you're just keeping a character warm for the next guy that's coming along.
And like, did you have a favorite aspect of Constantine to write about? Because you know he's very layered and he's an anti-hero. Sometimes he's a hero. So, did you have a favorite thing to write about Constantine?
Well, I guess when I was going to write John Constantine, this guy said, "All you have to know about John Constantine is that he's a bastard."
Yeah, exactly.
No, the thing is, I didn't quite agree. I thought about that. I didn't quite agree with that. I mean, I've known a few bastards before, and I've read about a few bastards, and I didn't think he was one quite. He did stuff that sounded a bit, that came across as a bit bastardly. He made mistakes, and he was careless with people.
Yeah.
But I felt that he wasn't just. He was much more than just a bastard. I thought that he had a heart, but that heart was often in the wrong place. But I thought he had this gift. But even that, he was kind of like messed up slightly. I thought he was flawed. He had lots of flaws, but I thought that there had aspects to him which were quite kind. It was just all messed up and all these flaws. It could never quite express itself properly. So I wanted to write a John Constantine that had a bit of a nuance, that explored this other side of John Constantine, which is why I had him in that relationship and getting married. You know, that he had this other side to him. He had that kind of softer side, even though it's all mixed up in this hard drinking, swearing, bit of a mess sometimes. Because one of his problems is he's just a bit of a mess.
Yeah. And you actually got to write issue 300, I believe.
I did, yeah. Well, you know, I felt, Daniel, that for a little bit, I thought that they might be saying, let's bring this to a close. So I kind of had mind game sorted out. So I thought wherever I am, I wanted to end and make it feel as though it was meant to be, and it was a designed end rather than just a story chopped halfway through. You know, so I wanted to write a story that felt as though it was bringing stuff home again, which is why I had John Constantine leave London and got that journey back home to Liverpool, where it all started. So I wanted to do a story that felt as though somehow the story had come full circle. He was back in Liverpool, and somehow, you know, all these years of stories have ended back home.
And did you feel nervous at all? Because, you know, when it comes to any character who has loads of fans, did you feel like, okay, well, I have to get this right?
Well, I felt as I wanted to get it right. I don't think nervous is quite the right word. I wouldn't say nervous. I'd say there was a degree of responsibility, but that's all right. But that's good. That was fun, you know, to have that responsibility. It was fun to know that this episode really matters. It really counts, and I tried to write it as though it really counted.
Yeah, absolutely. And like your work on Constantine is amazing, but you also wrote another character called Shade the Changing Man, and your work on Shade the Changing Man is brilliant, and you kind of actually made him more of a character. So were you aware of Shade the Changing Man before?
Yeah. When Karen Berger, who was like a really important character in comics, particularly in Vertigo and in all that kind of modern kind of comics.
Yeah.
The British invasion, as they call it, you know. I mean, Karen Berger wanted me to write a series for them, and we were talking about what to write, and she was saying, well, as I wasn't particularly known in America then, it might be a good idea to have a character or a series that has existed before, because it just helps you sometimes get slightly more known, you know. And the reason why we chose together, I say the Changing Man, was because he had appeared before, but he wasn't so big that I couldn't mess around with him.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get a character that's Wolverine or something, I mean, he's a great character, but you can't really do much with him because he's Wolverine, and he has to stay Wolverine, and so it's Batman and Superman and all these characters. So Shade was great because I could pretty much do what I wanted with him, and also I really liked. I mean, one of the comic creators that I've always kind of liked is Steve Ditko, because he's just so insane. I mean, so insane, and I related to that, you know. And Shade the Changing Man was insane as well. And what I liked about him, all that stuff about madness, I thought, well, this is up my street. This is exactly the kind of stuff I want to write about. But also the story felt as though it wasn't really well worked out. It was almost had lots of ideas, but didn't really come together. So that was perfect. So I thought, well, good. That means that gives me lots of room to go and take it and do what I want with it.
So, like, sorry, go on.
No, go on, man.
Sorry, like you said, you felt freedom with Shade. So did you feel like, okay, well, I can do what I want, introduce new things, make him more of a character? Because he wasn't very much explored. So did you feel like, okay, I can do whatever I want essentially with this?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. That, and I can only imagine how much fun that is. But you've actually, maybe it's the same for other characters, but you've written so much Shade. Do you think that over time you start understanding him more as a character? Like maybe you just got on, or
yeah. Well, I think when you write a character over a number of episodes, I'm not sure if we understand. Maybe a bit of it is that you understand that character more, and sometimes that character might change slightly or become slightly more nuanced. You know, as in slightly more sides and slightly more depth to him. So I think that that's what you explore. I mean, and but you're right. But I did write a lot of Shade, and it was great. But I loved it. I mean, a lot of people really sort of even now really love Shade the Change Man, and I think because of not only Shade himself, but I think the characters that I had around him, I think people really responded well to. I mean, there's this character called Kathy, who he has a relationship with, and she's really, really important. And on episode 50, I kind of wanted to kind of like change things around a bit. So I'd kind of written 50 of these things, and Kathy was really important. I thought, well, it's almost Kathy's becoming so important. I thought that by killing her or having her die, it puts Shade in a really different situation. And I thought the book needed to have a different situation, a different direction.
Yeah.
And so I killed Kathy. And I know it sounds vicious, doesn't it? But I kind of almost immediately regretted it. So I carried on writing the book, and I felt that it had lost some of its heart. So sometimes you do things, and then you regret it.
Man, like he just nonchalantly just killed her off for a book.
Well, yeah, well, it was a bit of thought involved. I know it's like we kind of these terrible gods squashing flies, you know. But it's not quite. You did think about it because Kathy was a really important character.
Yeah.
But I thought that it just allowed for sometimes a comic after a while you can feel as though it needs another kind of a big change. So the main character has to deal with something really extreme. And because it's when a character has to deal with something really extreme that you start to understand and see things about a character, what that character is really made of.
Yeah, exactly. And like your work in Shade, Changing Man, is still loved by so many, and like you're responsible for him being such a huge character, because I think if you didn't, write your comic, maybe he wouldn't be as well known. But you also worked on Justice League Dark, and you're the creator of Justice League Dark, it's an amazing team. So how did that?
I mean, it was in some ways. I mean, I was the creator of it, and we discussed who to come on it. In some ways, when I was asked to bring John Constantine on board, whether I would like to take Constantine on board, and I thought, well, why not? I kind of also felt, because at that time, when Constantine came on board Justice League Dark, he was also appearing in Hellblazer. And it was quite fun because a bit Hellblazer was still going. So I was writing John Constantine in Hellblazer, and that was Vertigo comic. So he was smoking and drinking and swearing. And then when he appeared in Justice League Dark, because it wasn't Hellblazer, he couldn't be smoking. And I think he could drink, but he couldn't swear. So there was a slightly different version of Constantine.
A slightly watered down version.
Well, yeah, or just you don't see those other sides to him,
Yeah.
I mean, they felt that it was confusing to the reader to have these two versions of Constantine. I actually didn't. I think that the reader of these kind of comics are sophisticated enough and intelligent enough to understand that it's the same character, but it's just a slightly different version or a slightly different telling of that story.
And did you use the lineup of did you get to choose the lineup of the team?
Yeah, you know what? I think I did. I mean, if I didn't, I'd chose most of them. You know, because it's often not as clear cut as I chose. Usually, it's more of a case of I suggest these, and these, and the editor, maybe someone else, the group guy says, yeah, this is really good. So it becomes a little bit of a negotiation.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the storyline and the characters were essentially created by me.
Yeah, and like if you could add an additional member to Justice League Dark, would you? And who would it be?
Oh God.
See, I'm asking very important questions here.
Yeah, no, well, I don't know. I mean, I've got. I mean, if it could be not necessarily from DC,
Yeah.
I'd quite like. Look, I have my own reasons. I'd quite like to have had Elektra Assassin in there, but I've got my own reason for wanting to write her again.
Yeah, and like, there's one character who you haven't mentioned would be a great addition to Justice League Dark, and that's Doop, because he just fit in so.
Well, actually, you're right. I was thinking about your question today, and actually, I did scribble down Doop ? Only because he's a really good character for any team, because any modern team, because he films them and he makes himself aware and makes himself conscious, and makes them be able to look at themselves again. And you know, by knowing they're being filmed, it kind of affects the way they act, I think, a bit.
Yeah, and Duke is just such a cool character. So I think he could just make some portal or something, because he has infinite power. Even the Avengers wanted him, so he could just appear in any universe, you know. Like,
well, it's anything. I mean, it's kind of like all the kind of deep and intelligent work that I've done in my career, Daniel. I'm going to be remembered for Doop. You know, on my gravestone, there's going to be creator of Doop. You know.
And I'll just throw a drawing of Dupe there, you know.
I think you're right.
Not a bad legacy to have creating Dupe.
Well, I guess there's worse.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, well, Dupe is like the greatest character to ever exist, because, you know, when I found out that there was a green X-Men, it was just kind of an infinite god. Well, then, you know, you're sorted. He's perfect. And, like, I'm not sure, do you know James Gunn, the director?
James Gunn, yeah.
Yeah, he said that if he could create his own X-Men film, Dupe would be one of his members.
Well, I'd want that. Maybe they'll give you some money for it.
Yeah, well, that's great. And maybe they'll send you out to Dupe merchandise. You can wear T-shirts of Dupe, get posters all around, you know.
Yeah.
Dupe. I don't know how we were talking about John Constantine and then it went into us talking about Dupe. It's just the power of interview.
That's what Dupe does, you see. He gets into these places where you weren't expecting him to get into.
He's just that powerful. He just inserts himself into conversations. But speaking of films and like Justice League Dark, would you like to see a live action Justice League?
Look, I mean, why not? It'd be cool, and it'd be great if it happens. It's not the kind of thing I would bang on the cinema doors to go and see personally, because I think that most films from comics don't quite work.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting. I think that films pretend to be the more intelligent and the more adult and the more sophisticated medium, but I often feel that when a film is made of a comic, it's dumbed down slightly.
Yeah.
You know, I think comics can often be more intelligent, more literate, deeper, and more, you know, they're not as slick and they're not as expensive and they're not as big because they're not a film. But I think sometimes they have things that films just don't have.
Yeah, and I think comics are hot properties now because, you know, all the studios want their own Avengers Endgame, or, you know, they want their own superhero franchise. So yeah, I'd say it's only going to get popular.
Well, maybe you're right. I think you're very right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so also on Justice League Dark, you have experience writing for teams such as X-Statix, but was it hard writing for a team as opposed to writing for one character? Because, you know, when there's about 8 characters and you need to like maybe fit 4 of them in an issue, or was it like you wanted to give them all enough screen time, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think I am temperamentally better suited to one person. You know, because I think that's the kind of characters I think I'm most known for. Yeah. I mean, Shade the Changing Man was a bit like a team book in that you had Shade and you had Kathy, and you had Lenny, but I think I quite like stories about one person really getting into that person's psychology.
Yeah.
X-Statix was slightly different because it was a team book, but it was almost like an anti-team book. They were unlike any team, and that was kind of different. And I loved writing that, and I thought that really worked as a team book. But that was different because that's X-Statix, and I think they're kind of like quite different from, and they're quite different from the usual kind of team book. So I think that I was okay writing a team, but I think that my gifts, if I have any gifts, they would lend themselves more towards, the individual who's kind of like with that solitary voice going to the world and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, I think even if you're writing a comic about one person, we could fit Doop in there somewhere. He slides in so well, he's just that type of
You
character.
got to get over Doop, you have to get over Doop, Daniel.
That's the only reason I have you on today. This is not just, it's just 4 hours.
Yeah, that is starting to become very clear, actually.
Yeah, I bamboozled you into thinking I'm talking about like all these other comics, and we're going to tie it back together with Doop. So there'll definitely be another Doop mention in this video.
All right, okay.
So this is, like I said, I'm a master at going into segues, but you also worked on X-Statix. And because Joe could say that he recently became, well, during that time, he was recently the editor of Marvel. So did he reach out to you and say, here, do you want to do your own X title, or?
Well, actually, it was, I think how it worked, Axel Alonso, do you know Axel? Axel became like chief editor of Marvel. I think he sort of took over Joe's job. He was a fantastic editor. He used to edit Vertigo, then he went over to Marvel. I think he said, do you want to do some episodes of X-Force that hadn't been around for a while? And but so we then started to talk, well, maybe we should I could do something more with it. And again, X-Force was a good book for me to take over because they didn't really care about it. It didn't really mean anything to enough people for Marvel to really care about it. So I could then really mess around with it and really change it. So I had my idea that I was going to change this comic completely. So it was about something. I think a lot of comics just aren't about something. And I want a book. I want to write a book that is about something. And I wanted to write a book about our celebrity-obsessed society, and particularly back then when I was writing it 15 years ago, it was just starting with that really celebrity kind of consciousness. And I thought that if these kind of what I really liked about getting together a bunch of, so X-Force kind of morphed into X-Statix, and what I was really interested in there was that superpowers weren't that great, so they weren't very good at being superheroes, but they were excellent at being stars. So that's what they were good at. So they're like these celebrities. You hear about this person's a celebrity, and you think, well, they're not a celebrity. They're not a singer or a dancer or a musician. They are a celebrity, and their power, or if you like, their ability is about being a celebrity, and that's what they can do. And that's what I was trying to feed into a bit with X-Statix. Just this, how these people, that even as some of their supervillains that were fighting, that was never important in that book. The book was not about whether or not they can beat up this supervillain or that supervillain team. It was always about their relationships, their relationship with fame, and their relationships with each other. And so that's what I was interested in.
And I love that, because that idea of if superheroes did exist, obviously they'd be celebrities. So
they'd have agents, they'd have all the things which stars have. They'd have their fan clubs, and they would have little breakdowns. And one might have an alcohol problem because of the pressure. So I wanted to get all of that stuff in there.
Yeah, and so was that something that appealed to you, doing a mix of kind of superheroes and celebrities? And did you always go, okay, so let's see if I can mash those together and kind of see what happens?
Right, that's what I was interested in. I thought that superheroes was a really good way in which I could explore this phenomenon, which was called celebrity.
Yeah, and like the characters, like they're all most. I think that they're all created by you, your own characters. So is that choice, or would you prefer to written for like pre-created characters, like I don't know, Wolverine, Cyclops,
No,
or
no, because remember we had some pre-created characters in X-Force. We
yeah,
quickly got rid of them, so we quickly ditched them and ditched the name. Because as soon as you create your own character, you can pretty much do what you want with them. They can go where you want them to go, or where they want to go.
yeah,
If characters, even if they're quite a minor character, you're limited to a degree in what you can do to them. I mean, I said earlier about how I killed Kathy. Well, I could do that because she was my character.
yeah.
I couldn't say, well, okay, I'm gonna kill Gambit. I'm gonna kill. I don't know. I'm gonna kill Wonder Woman. I mean, they would not like that, and they wouldn't accept it. So when you have your own characters, that character can then, the character could become whatever. You could become gay. You could die. You could become horrible. You could become so many things. It's just about the character. Then you have more freedom to write about what you want to write about.
And like that comic deals with a lot of real issues, like substance abuse, depression, and all these actual real things that go on in the world.
What wraps that up in comedy? So there was a lot of humor in there, but actually within that humor, there's also lots of, as you said, really dark stuff. There's a guy with obsessive compulsive disorder. He has to wash his hands. It deals a lot with racism,
Yeah.
because there's a black member of the team, and he wonders whether he's like a token black member of the team. So it deals with racism, it deals with sexism, it deals with mental disorder, all the good stuff.
And did you ever think that maybe, this could be too dark for a Marvel comic? Was that
Oh
ever?
no, that's not. Look, it's really important, I think, when you're writing for something, not to self-edit, not to kind of pre-think what an editor or what the company is going to think. And so they think, oh, they might not like this. I better not say it. You just have to say it. And then if you have a problem with it, then if it's too dark for them, then there's a battle that you deal with there and then. But when you're writing it, it's really important that you write the story that you want to write.
Yeah.
Now, something I've had to change, like in X-Statix, when I tried to have Princess Diana as a part of X-Statix, because I just thought that she'd be a perfect member for this team. I thought that Lady Di was kind of, she couldn't really do anything, but she was great at being this celebrity. So I thought that she's perfect for X-Statix. And do you know the story about Lady Diana in X-Statix?
Not in X-Statix, actually. I did.
Oh yeah, that was what I was gonna. I wrote this script with Lady Diana joining X-Statix, and we gave her this pink kind of spandex suit, and Michael Reed did the cover of her jumping over, I think, Doop, or jumping over.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it hadn't been published yet, but I'd been in Europe, so I was coming home with the Eurostar to London, and they gave away these free newspapers. They gave away the Daily Mail, and I looked at the front cover, and it had the front cover that Mike had drawn of Lady Diana, and the headline was "Sick," and they hated it. And I was invited on television to talk about it, defend it. I took an interview for the Guardian. The Palace said they're very disappointed. They're very upset about this, and because it's Lady Diana, and so then Marvel said, "Look, we can't publish this. The royal family are really upset about it." So I said, "You're American. I thought you'd had a revolution, so you wouldn't have to worry about what the British royal family have to think about anything." But no, they said, "No, we can't use them."
Wow, so were you the most hated man in Britain?
I was. You know what? Then I quite liked the idea. It's good. I think everyone should be the most hated man in their country, but at least for 5 minutes.
You're a man. Only you would enjoy being the most hated man in Britain.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of also look. I'm not a big royalist. I'm not a big royalist. I mean, I don't hate them. I think I've always said that I think about them probably the same as they think about me. You know, I mean, they don't care about me, and I don't really care about them. And so yeah, I mean, what's strange is I always had this fairly kind of like irritated by Princess Diana and the whole kind of shtick. But when I was starting to write the story, I had to do some research about her. And I have to say, almost against myself, I started to feel some grudging sympathy for her. And I said, no, 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 you can't have sympathy for these people. But anyway, it was cancelled.
It's
I
yeah.
mean, maybe Marvel will right to cancel it. You know, what do I know?
Yeah.
And maybe it was good. Maybe it was in the light of, I don't know, everything that's happening. You know, maybe it was because he had died, of course, tragically.
Yeah.
And so maybe it wasn't so great. Maybe it was just a bit of a foolish idea. But anyway, it's history.
Yeah, well, such is life. It's good. And like, you know, I told you I'd tie it back with Doop. I literally wrote one question just to talk about Doop, but I brought him up beforehand somehow. You know, it's the power of subversion. I just slipped them in there. But Doop,
Okay.
about what made you look at the team and say, you know what, this is missing? A little green monster called Doop. Like, how did that come about?
Well, I think I have to say that as quite often is the case with characters, you create it with the artist. And I wanted someone, and we wanted. This is a story about a team who are obsessed with fame. They're obsessed with celebrity. So what are they going to have? They're going to have someone that films them wherever they go. They're going to be filmed, and that film is going to be relayed around the world because that's really important to them. For them, it's not good enough that they beat up some supervillains. They have to be filmed beating up the supervillain, and people have to see them. Otherwise, what's the point? So I wanted to have someone in there that would film them, and then it just took over from there. You know, then it was just a crazy creative process. So I thought, well, why not a big green potato alien? You know.
Man, I love Duke with a passion. Greatest comic character to ever.
Clearly, man, clearly.
if it hasn't been obvious. But as much as my little heart would hate it, I have to move on from Duke. You also got to work on Batman, which your work on Batman is amazing. You got to work on Batman Dark City. But was that hard for you? Because the thing about Batman is he's not a very talkative character. And like many writers have had this problem where they're writing a character who's not talkative. They have to kind of create other characters to bounce off that character. So for Batman, did you have to do the same or?
Well, not so much. I mean, the first story, and possibly our best Batman story, was Dark Knight Dark City. At that time, Daniel, I started to go to New York quite a lot. You know, because obviously DC were in New York and Marvel were in New York, and I started to know people. And I really liked. I really got quite. I fell for New York a little bit. You know, I mean, because it's its size and its history. You know, the waves of immigration, the bars. You know, that I kind of really was quite enamored with New York, you know, and its history and everything about it. And Gotham City has always struck me as being New York, really. I mean, it's Gotham City is kind of New York, really, in Batman world. And I figured that of all these characters that were often in Batman, Gotham City is kind of like this character that's never really been explored. Like, you can't imagine Batman without Gotham City. But it's kind of, I always start to see it as a character, an unexplored character. So in many ways, in that book, I wanted to make the city itself an important character. You know.
And like you did a great job on that. But like your work on Batman was brilliant. But Riddler was the villain. Now Riddler, like I love the Riddler, and he's been good. He's been getting a lot of actual love in terms of comic books for the last couple of years. But he's always kind of been considered corny villain because you know someone who just does riddle. So did you get to choose the Riddler as the villain, or did you say, okay, well I want to write Riddler as the villain for this book?
I've always just written stuff as I want to write them, and then if they don't like it, they asked me to change it. So I just wrote the Riddler that I wanted to write for that story, and so slightly darker, slightly crazier, slightly more insane.
Yeah,
because it suited that story. I mean, there's a number of characters who have been quite jokey characters, like Submariner he's quite a jokey character. But I wrote a storyline called The Depths, where he becomes much more of a kind of a demonic or scary or dark character. So I quite like taking these because when I was a kid and I saw Submariner, I was quite drawn towards Submariner. He always had that strange look about him, slightly alien but slightly human. You know, there's just something slightly, Submariner, and so when I did this story called The Depths, I wanted to make him as I saw him as a kid. And I never saw him as a jokey character. I was almost so slightly creepy about him, slightly demonic about him.
Yeah, and like your work on that was amazing. But I've read this on your Wikipedia, and I think I know a little bit more about it. But is this true that you're somewhat responsible for contributing to the character of Azrael?
Okay, here's the truth. The name itself was not mine.
We have an exclusive.
Well, I don't know how exclusive it is. It's the editor of Batman at that time. So I think I was writing Detective Comics, and Alan Grant was writing Batman. And I think I was just about, I'd chosen to come off of Detective Comics because I'd kind of written a few of them. And so I was having lunch with Denny O'Neil, who was the editor on the Batman books, and a legend, obviously, in comics.
Absolutely.
And I was just talking to him about, it was just something I mentioned over lunch. I said, Denny, what you should do with Batman is have this kind of character and have Batman to go and I kind of had this spark of inspiration, and I don't know, over pudding into coffee. I started to tell him what the kind of storyline he could do. Didn't mention Azrael, but it was kind of the Azrael storyline.
Yeah.
But so I suggested this story, and then I kind of forgot about it. And then a few weeks later, Alan Grant phoned up and says, "Milligan, you bastard," in his Scottish accent.
Yeah.
Because then they said, "We want you to do this kind of story," and I mean, obviously, I'm sure Alan then put his own spin on it, and I'm sure Alan then took it and run with it and made it very different. But the first spark, if you like, the first egg was laid, I think, at that lunch with Denny O'Neil, when I just said, "Well, what you should do is perhaps this." It was just a throwaway, like when you ever, it's just a throwaway thought of this would be a good idea.
Yeah, and it absolutely was a great idea. But is it true you wrote a Batman story called Hungry Grass?
What?
Hungry Grass.
Oh yeah, well, that's what I was in the Detective Comics.
And that's set in Ireland. No, well, it's kind of based.
It certainly is. Yeah. Hungry Grass is based on an old Irish legend. I read about it in Lady Gregory. Have you ever heard of Lady Gregory?
No.
Her name's also called Spinoza. She was related to Oscar Wilde. Lady Gregory collected. She was all part of the Celtic revival in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and she collected together lots of old Irish myths and legends. And it is true that the Hungry Grass was this thing that during the times of the famine in Ireland, there was a legend amongst some people, obviously I did a few, that if you trod on a piece of grass or a piece of ground where someone had died of hunger, then you too could be gripped by sudden hunger. So some of the more superstitious people would always carry, unless you had something to eat immediately. So some of the more superstitious people would carry a little bit of bread with them. So if they trod on the hungry grass, you need to eat something really quickly, or you too would starve.
Yeah.
I always thought that was such an interesting storyline, and so I tried to then.
And like the bad guy is Irish as well in that story, so it was a pretty cool thing while researching you, because I'm very professional, as I'm sure you can see. I don't just talk about Doop, believe it or not, but I Wikipedia, and I've seen that story, and like I've seen Irish, and like, because that's just so cool to me to think that there's kind of a Batman story in some universe where there's a lot of Irish lore involved. So I really did want to talk about.
I really like that idea as well. It's such a, it's kind of beautiful legend, but also it's a kind of a chilling legend because it was all based around people dying of starvation. So it's a fairly dark and somber kind of legend to base it on. But I thought that, well, that's okay. But I thought it was really interesting to use that.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last Batman-ish question: you actually also got to write a Scarecrow story in Scarecrow's Tales. It was only a little small one, but I love that story. It's my favorite Scarecrow, one of my favorite Scarecrow stories of all time. It's brilliant. But so do you like Scarecrow as a villain? Is he one of your favorite villains?
Well, I thought it was quite a strange character, and I mean, sometimes writing these stories about characters who are kind of in the background of comics can be quite fun to write because you can put your own stamp on them. I did a story about Rhino once. I mean, Rhino's a pretty dumb character, but for my story, he was perfect for my story. So, like, you know, I'd say that Rhino and Scarecrow are pretty similar kind of characters in that no one takes too much notice of them, so you can pretty much do what you want with them.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I loved your Scarecrow story because it's just so good and it really humanizes him as a character. Before, I never really had much of an opinion on him because I just figured, okay, well, he's a bad guy who likes fear. But after reading your story, now whenever I hear the word Jonathan Crane, I'm like, oh yeah, he's good, he's good.
Yeah, but also, I think you said something really interesting there. Just a bad guy who enjoys fear. I mean, that's kind of not interesting enough, is it? I think, and in kind of like, I think in real life, even really bad people. I mean, even the Nazis, Adolf Hitler and Goebbels, the Nazis. I mean, they were evil. I mean, if anyone was evil, those guys were evil. But they weren't sitting around laughing, saying, "Ha ha, we're so evil." They weren't looking around saying, "We're so wicked." They thought what they were doing completely made sense. In their twisted universe, what they were doing was perfect sense. And I think that those people are more scary. So I think that by humanizing them, you make them more real. And I think there's a danger of making them like monsters. Well, you know, they're not monsters, they're human beings, or they're scarecrows. And I think that by making them more human, you also make them, I think, in some strange way more scary. Not only can you feel something for them, but you also, I think, by humanizing them, making them more scary, I think.
Yeah, that's such a cool insight into characters like that. But before I have to let you go, talk to me a bit more about some of your new books. We'll talk about each of them. But you have some newer books that came out recently. First off, let me talk about American Ronin. That only came out recently enough, right?
Yeah, it's just coming out, and I think the collection is just coming out about now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really happy with that. Fantastic artist from Spain, and the book really is set in the near future, when it's kind of like James Bond meets sci-fi, but it's set in the near future where governments don't really control things; these big corporations control things, and that's really based on how I saw the world moving towards anyway. That you're in Ireland, I'm in Britain, someone else might be in France, and we have our governments and we vote for them. We all think we have democracy and we have control of our lives. But actually, more and more, it's these huge, rich and mega corporations that control stuff. That move money around, that can control our lives. We've got no vote in that at all. So I wanted to do a story in that kind of world, you know.
Yeah, and where can people pick that up from, like Forbidden Planet, or is there any shops that have it?
Say again?
Is there anywhere people can buy the American Ronin?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's on sale over here. It's done really well, and I say the collection is just coming out. You should perhaps jump straight into, if you can afford it, at your tender age, if you can afford to buy.
Yeah, I do so much chores. I'm flush with cash
Is
everywhere.
that right?
Yeah, you know, Sweep the Stairs store. That's my next 4 comics box. You know, not to brag or anything. You know.
Well, that's really good. Well, but so that's, and the hero is this guy, and all of these corporations, they have Ronins. They have their agents who basically try to kill each other to get an advantage. And our hero is someone who's had it something done to his brain, where he has super empathy. You know, so but I'd have to get some of your. If I got some of your DNA, I could get a sense of what makes you scared, what you're feeling, what you're loving. So all these stuff, I could find out all this stuff about you and really empathize deeply with you.
And then you'd have your very own Daniel clone. So what's not to love? You just put it on your shelf or something, put it next to a Doop statue. I fit in so well. I won't even tell I'm there. You see?
Yeah.
But you're another book worked on Happy Hour, which I've read the plot for and it sounds brilliant. Has that come out?
Is a dark satire, and on the face of it seems like comedy, and there's a lot of humor in there, but there's also a dark satire, and I think and people have really loved it. I think for some reason, these things that have been happening in the world recently, it's really caught the public's attention, and it's really caught a mood of the public, and it's a pretty wacky idea, but it was based on me going to America, where I don't know about it. I think based because how happy people are in America. You go into a restaurant, you go. I don't know if you've been to America.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know how people are just so, hey, have a nice day.
Yeah.
And they're so up and so happy. And as a British person, I come from where our default mode is kind of a bit miserable or a bit ironic. Like going to this country where it's just non-stop. In some ways, it's great. But I thought there's a real disconnect between how happy and wonderful it's great it is, and then on that same country, there's racism, there's gun crime, there's murder, and there's madness. And I thought it's a really interesting kind of balance with those two things. So I wanted a story exploring that a little bit.
Yeah, and has that come out or?
It's come out and got great reviews. And so look, maybe what I should do, Daniel, is if your dad could give me your address, I could send you some of this stuff, and maybe you could then give a bit of a review of it you could do a special review on your
Absolutely.
YouTube.
I'd be absolutely honored to get a book from you.
Well, I think we could sort that out. Yeah.
So, I guess you could say, so me and Peter Milligan, we kind of just become best friends. So don't tell me otherwise. No need to say anything, Peter. It's official.
When you're old enough, you can buy me a beer.
Yeah. Look, I don't drink beer at all.
Well, nor do I.
Yeah, we're both very trustable. But this was a book that was just announced, I think recently enough, Out of Body, which is being published by Aftershock.
Yeah, Aftershock. It's my first book. I've got two books I'm writing for Aftershock. I've got this one. It's a one-off story called The God of Tremors, and it's about this kid. It's about this young kid. It's set in the kind of like 18th, late 19th century. It's about this kid who's got epilepsy, and the effect, the family, how they deal with that. I've got epilepsy, so I wanted to do a story where I use some of my experiences of having epileptic seizures.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do a story about that.
Yeah.
Out of Body is a story about someone who wakes up and finds he's been attacked in the street and left for dead, and he's now on a life support system, and somehow he has to find out who tried to kill him, but he can't move his body.
Oh,
and wow, he does it by
amazing.
Yeah, he does it by astral projection.
That sounds amazing. Tell me, is there a specific charity for epilepsy that I could link in the description, or is there? I think Epilepsy Action is the one I give to. Yeah.
But Epilepsy Action is the one I tend to give to. I mean, even though I've got epilepsy, I also give a bit of money to an epilepsy charity because I can afford it at the moment. So I give some money.
If I do find a link for that, there'll be a link for Epilepsy Action in the description. Make sure to go check them out. But those are your newest enough books, so make sure to go check them out. And I have the last few questions for you. I have them on here. So another question I want to ask you is, you've done some really crazy ideas. And when I say crazy, and they're so brilliant. Like in X-Statix, there was this story where Iron Man fought Mr. Sensitive in the nip. Like they were both nude.
That was my favorite. That's my favorite fight stream.
Is
it? One person who was uber sensitive. You touch them and it hurts. You got someone else, Tony Stark, Iron Man. attack, and he's had all this stuff. So he had this fight where all it takes is like a breath of air between them, and they're both clutching themselves. Tony Stark thinks he's having a heart attack, and Mr. Sensitive is really hurting. So yeah, I mean, and the artwork. I mean, Mike Allred's artwork on that fight scene. Mike Allred is a fantastic artist, and he's perfect for that kind of comic book sensibility, you know.
And like your stories, they're just so good because I could list so much where there's just some odd things going on. But do you ever look back at your stories and think, I can't believe I did that, or I don't know where that came from?
I like, but maybe it can't be too weird for me. I mean, I always try to make it so it's not weird just for weird's sake. That sometimes there's a point to it all, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do like stuff that goes out there slightly.
Yeah, and I love your work because that's one of the standout things. Things are going crazy, and it's such a smart way of things when something like that happens. But talking about your more like looking back at comic books, do you look at like from your earlier works and think, oh, I improved on that part. I could have done that better.
Well, I mentioned earlier Electra. I think she's such a good character, and I did this short series for Marvel, and they'd asked me to come up with an idea, and I came up with this idea for a story. It was quite complicated and quite dark, and they said yes. And just before I started to write it, they had a change of editor, and there'd been a kind of a night of long knives at Marvel. Lots of people had lost their job, and they wanted me to change everything and make it much more straight. So I had to write an Electra in a kind of a more straight way than I really wanted, and my heart wasn't in it, and I thought it really shows. So I kind of that's the one story that I'm really disappointed with, and so I wouldn't mind the opportunity sometime to revisit that character.
Yeah,
and like do it right this time,
Yeah, and I'm really resisting making a Doop appearance joke, so stay with me. I was just going to say Doop's going to show up somewhere. I had to pinch myself not to say it, so just stay composed. I'm just that good. But another question I want to ask you: if you could write a story about any character, your dream comic in the whole realm of comic books, who would it be?
Oh, you know what, Daniel, I kind of write about what I want to write. I mean, it's kind of. I don't think there's anyone I particularly aching that I haven't written before, because it's pretty much I've done that. I mean, what I'm quite interested in at the moment is coming up with new stories and new characters and creating new stuff rather than characters that have existed in the past. So I have to be honest. I'd be lying if I said, "Oh, it's this character," or it's got that impulse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've taken up so much time, so I'll just ask one more question. If anyone was looking to get into comic books, what would your advice be?
Well, it depends whether you want as a writer or as an artist. Probably now, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to do some of that self-publishing, some of those little fanzines and some of those smaller companies, perhaps online, just to get your name known a little bit and just to cut your teeth a bit. If you're a writer, I would say that, and actually if you're an artist, the most important thing to do is don't just look at comics or don't just read comics. If you're a writer, read novels, read tough novels, read great novels, and draw your experiences from novels, from life, not just this Denny O'Neil comic. Again, if you're an artist, don't just look at comic books art. Go to art galleries, look at fantastic artists, and so draw your experiences from outside of comic books. Otherwise, all you're doing is rehashing and reheating what other people have done. If you're going to do something, you've got to try it for yourself. And the best way to do that is to draw your references from outside of comic books.
Absolutely, and I don't think we could end it on a better note. Before we finish, is there anywhere people can check you out, or is there anything you'd like to promote?
Well, you can try to follow me on Twitter. I tend to talk about what I want to do. I'm one Peter Milligan at Twitter.
At one Peter Milligan, so there'll be an ad for him and down in the description. And of course, your new books. Let's just go back to it again. American Ronin, Happy Hour, and as newest Out of Body. You can probably pick your
There
local.
will be new ones in the near future, but let's stick to that for now.
Yeah.
That's quite enough of that.
You can probably pick that up from your local comic shop like mine at Dublin City, Big Bang Comics, Forbidden Planet, Sub-City Comics, or just your local comic shop. Make sure to go pick it up. Yeah, but is there anything else you'd like to say, or are you all?
No, I think we've had a thorough examination.
You see, I'm just that professional. What can I say? And there was not one mention of Doop in that sentence. So
There was not.
my medal will be in the post, I imagine. But thank you guys so much for watching, and please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children's Society. Links in that description, and of course the Epilepsy Action. If I do find links, there will be that in the description. But Peter, thank you again for coming on. This has been such a pleasure, and thank you all so much for watching. And I will see you all in the next video. Stay safe. Bye.